Yippee-i-yo-ki-yay.
Hello, this is I Go Travel with Don Barnett. We are in the heart of cattle country. Some of you old-timers might recall some of this famous song called Cattle Call. The song was written a decade or two earlier, but the well-known singer Eddie Arnold made it quite a famous, well-known song. And the old cowboys used to hum and sing songs on the night shift to keep the cattle at ease and quiet and avoid any kind of a stampede throughout the night.
The cattle are prowling, the coyotes are howling, the cowboy is singing this lonesome cattle call.
We pulled off the interstate into this town called Abilene. In its early days, it was the first and one of the biggest and wildest cow towns in the country. It was the days when they were driving thousands of head of Texas longhorns like this one from rich grasslands of Texas north to the railway head here at Abilene. From here, they loaded the cattle onto trains and shipped them by rail to the big populations in Chicago, New York, and other big populations along the Atlantic coast. And we have been eating beef ever since. We are right here at the Abilene stockyards, but they're nothing like they were in the old days. It's all steel gates and steel fences, and they have their small rodeo here now. But the main part of the stockyards in the old days, made of wood, and they were right along the railroad track. And they've built up the downtown area on what was the old stockyards at one time. We are in the downtown area of Abilene. The rail lines are still here, and so is the wind hitting my microphone. Streets and buildings replaced the old stockyards that were right here in the downtown area. This was the first cow town of the West. They originally called the place Mud Creek, but it was renamed Abilene, which meant grassy plains. Lots of open land and rich grass made it a good place for the big herds from Texas to meet the railway. Trucks like these haul cattle nowadays. The bison were replaced by cattle, Texas longhorns, and the cattle have been largely replaced by agricultural crops like wheat and corn, and things like beans, squash, and sunflowers. We are right along Interstate I-70, running east-west. It starts actually in Baltimore, Maryland, on the Atlantic coast. And it runs through St. Louis, Kansas City. We're a couple of hours or so west of Kansas City here at Abilene. And we're going west, headed for Denver and the Interstate 15, which is a north-south interstate that runs from Canada to Las Vegas and Los Angeles. But again, we're back here in Abilene, the first cow town of the Wild West. And we're about straight north of Texas. And they ran those longhorn cattle north up to Abilene to the railhead, where they then connected, like I said, on to further north to Chicago and New York, where the big population and the beef eaters were really at. As you can see, it is big, flat country, easy for driving big herds of cattle across, all the way from Texas, all flat country. It's fairly dry country. They have to irrigate, and of course the wind blows, and they take advantage of that with these big areas of big windmills. And they, of course, produce electricity. That early cattle drive trail was called the Chisholm Trail, and it ran from San Antonio area in Texas north to the rail trailhead at Abilene here. This is old-time cowboy and movie actor Roy Rogers singing about the Chisholm Trail.
Well, come along, boys, and listen to my tale. I'll tell you of my troubles on the old Chisholm Trail. Come a tie-yi, yippee-yippee-yay, yippee-yay. Come a tie-yi, yippee-yippee-yay.
I'll just scan the small rodeo grounds that are in Abilene today and tell you a little more about those early cattle drives. 5,000 cowboys herded 6,000 to 7,000 head of cattle every year. Each cattle drive moved around 3,000 head. It took 10 to 15 cowboys, 3 to 10 horses per cowboy. A most important person on the drive was the cook, who was usually a medical person as well, and usually a younger, less experienced cowboy called a wrangler looked after the horses. It was possible to move the cattle as much as 40 kilometers a day, but the animals lost weight if moved too hard or too fast. So 24 kilometers per day was better, and the trip took between 1 and 2 months. The main danger was a stampede, and theft of good animals was always a concern as well. One of the most important times was the night shift, overseeing the big cattle herd to see it did not get restless and spooked. Cowboys often hummed a tune or sang a song to soothe the cattle and let them know that they were there and everything was okay. A lightning storm would sometimes spook a herd. But the singing and humming of tunes that the cowboys did, that was really the origin of cowboy or Western music that has come down the decades to this present day. Abilene's biggest world buckle, right there, and other tourist attractions. You know, when the cattle were finally delivered to the trailhead here, the work was over. Only after the cattle were sold and it was payday and party time. The boys shaved, bathed, bought new clothes, howled, drank hard liquor, frequented the gambling halls, and the other thing, the ladies of the night. For them it was party time, and both the booze and the money flowed freely. The hooker halls were filled to capacity. Western singer George Hamilton IV had a very popular song of these times.
Abilene, prettiest town I've ever seen. Women there don't treat you mean in Abilene, my Abilene.
Booze, women, and money led to squabbles and conflict. Everybody carried a revolver, and gunfights were frequent. A sheriff had to be hired quite often, but control was impossible. Abilene hired gunslinger Wild Bill Hickok, but the twin revolvers on his hips made as much trouble as they solved. Wild Bill spent most of his time in the saloon playing cards. Saloons and lawlessness was the order of the day. The days of the big cattle drives and wild, lawless times came into their sunset years. More settlers meant that the days of the open plains were over. Cattle overgrazed and trampled crops. The cattle brought in a disease called Texas fever that was contagious to settlers' livestock. The few old fences like this one were replaced with endless strings of barbed wire, and barbed wire put an end to those big cattle drives across the open range. I made a couple of videos on Aberdeen here. One, of course, on the cattle drive, but the other one, we're going to hit the road pretty soon here on the interstate. And the American president who brought the interstate to this country grew up as a boy right here in Abilene. And if you want to see that, just click on to the next video in this travelogue. In the meantime, we're rolling on. This is I Go Travel with Don Barnett. Hit the subscribe button and that'll tell you when we're putting more videos on the internet. Adios for now. To find that other video on Abilene, on the president who brought the interstate system to the U.S., just do what it says on the lower part here of this picture. Just Google the little @ my name, Don Barnett 5090. Hit the word playlist in the middle of the page and scroll down to the Great Western Plains playlist.